Well, it's the big underlining theme of so much of this election, Kamal: trust. We're going to dissect new research which reveals that it's even worse than many people think.
And two words we've not heard much of in the election campaign: climate change. It's supposed to be the biggest issue we all face, and no one is talking about it.
And the big interview people are talking about.
What did you go without as a child?
We went out with lots of things, right? Because my parents wanted to put everything into our education, and that was a priority.
So what sort of things had to be sacrificed?
Sky TV.
Okay.
Kamal, we're going to be discussing whether it matters that Rishi Sunak is richer than the king.
Welcome to the Daily Tea with me, Kamal Ahmed.
And me, Camilla Tominey.
So let's kick off, Camilla, with the British Social Attitude Survey. Suitably nerdy. I must admit, I was actually quite excited this morning when I saw it early after my lovely morning run. I saw that the BSA's latest data has just come out. This is an amazing resource for the country. They have been interviewing thousands of people across the UK every year about their attitudes to everything from immigration to politics to Brexit, and it's published every year, and that timeline shows how people's opinions are changing over time. And I think today's statistics show us why there is this huge problem for the Conservatives in polling, and why Reform UK and the Lib Dems are snapping at the Conservatives' heels at the polls. So let's go through a little bit of that data. So NHS, we touched on this yesterday in the podcast, Camilla. Satisfaction with the NHS, 70% 2010.
Wow.
Today, 24%. What a decline that is. Dissatisfaction with social care has increased. A record high of 45% almost never trust the government to put the nation's interests first. That was only 34% in 2019. 80% of adults in the UK say the system of governing Britain needs a lot of improvement. Then on migration, obviously a big issue for this election. Reform UK and Nigel Farage have said it is an immigration election. This has been a bit more of a seesaw, quite interesting. 2014, 30% of people thought that migrants were good for the economy. That actually became a lot more positive, probably connected to the Brexit vote and leaving the European Union, so that free movement ended. People who thought that migration was good for the economy went up to nearly 60% by 2021. But it's fallen markedly since then, down to 40%. On immigration, and this is an interesting part of the discussion around politics, big differences, whether you're young or old, what your level of educational attainment is, and also your age really affects what you think about the immigration issue.
I mean, this reflection of, as you say, social attitudes speaks into this idea of Britain being broken. We've heard that from Reform this week. We've heard that from the Lib Dems this week. We've seen the Tories try and deflect those criticisms, although, to be fair, Rishi Sunak admitted that things hadn't been perfect and that people were rightly frustrated with me and with my party. We can also see this reflected in some other quite startling data, Kamal, which reflects that 1 in 6 victims no longer report crimes because they don't have faith in the police. So there's an overall lack of faith in our institutions. But I think as well as dissatisfaction, Kamal, there's another emotion which is at the heart of this election, and that is pure and simply anger. I think particularly Conservative voters are really angry. We talk about the red wall. What about the red mist? And it's appropriately coloured because that mist will enable Labour to, I think, have a pretty chunky majority come July the 5th. And I say anger because we learned today there was a poll carried out by Public First, and that revealed that a quarter of those who voted Conservative in 2019 now say that the Conservative Party deserves to lose all seats. So that's visceral hatred.
And Nigel Farage has lent into this. And you were saying when you were down at the Liberal Democrat Manifesto launch, quite similar language in the Liberal Democrat Manifesto. This chaos has to end. The Conservatives should be destroyed. I think Farage literally used that word. I think connected to the anger, the result of the anger is also then switching off. Apathy, I'm not going to engage. Can you imagine a situation, Camilla, given that the Conservatives are now battling it out in the low 20s and high teens for poll support with the Lib Dems and Reform UK, that Labour could win a majority of many hundreds, or over 100 seats, well north of that. Could be a huge majority, could be calamitous for the Conservatives, but it could be on less than 40% of the vote. I think for Labour and for the public, what was the one issue around Brexit that really motivated people to vote? It was that this could actually make a difference. They voted, it made a difference.
Yes.
There's a lot of information in this latest British Social Attitudes Survey that actually people are super disappointed with the Brexit outcomes as far as they've seen them. They haven't seen the economic benefits, or they haven't felt the economic benefits. Lots of economists say actually it's been bad for the economy. Having more positive connections with the European Union is now being supported by more and more people. They've seen Brexit as having not delivered. So they did the vote, they got Brexit, it hasn't worked. If they're ignored this time, more people vote for parties that are not Labour, but they get a huge Labour government. It has to put proportional representation, changing the parliamentary system, back into the policy agenda, because Labour have to be really careful with this idea of a supermajority, that they don't appear to be arrogant and taking their position of power for granted.
The Prime Minister has had to say today that he hasn't given up, because we've had the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps on the airwaves talking about, instead of talking about the Tories winning, they're now talking about preventing this supermajority. But I can't believe that we're even in the realms of discussing a Labour supermajority when the general public, as far as I can tell, do not have a clue what Keir Starmer or this party stands for. We await the manifesto, which is being launched tomorrow. Kamal, you're going.
I'll be going up, yes.
We'll do the whole of tomorrow's Daily Tea probably on it, because this is the party that expects to form the next government, and I think the polling is increasingly pointing towards that. But Sunak is right to say that the electorate is basically staring at a blank page. I mean, we just can't pin these people down on anything, and anything we have pinned them down on, they flip-flopped on, apart from, funnily enough, the rather unpopular VAT on private school fees policy. You're talking to a degree of sort of nihilism, apathy, ennui. It's almost that kind of, what's the pointism?
Exactly
We didn't have that with Brexit because it was going to make a difference. I agree with you. This atmosphere is reminding me of pre-Brexit times, this degree to which people feel that they're pulling on a lever and nothing's happening. So if, as you say, we have this situation where, for instance, Reform's vote share is bigger than the Conservatives, but because of first past the post, they get 3 seats. If the electorate feels like the political system literally doesn't work for them and that their vote doesn't count, and this is what Nigel Farage is playing on, he'll be delighted to see this situation of large vote share, small representation in the House of Commons. You then engender a new campaign, and you engender a campaign for proportional representation, PR. The trouble is with that, Kamal, is that requires cross-party collaboration. I spoke to Daisy Cooper, didn't I?
You did,
at the launch,
amazing.
and I said, "Would you work with Farage?" No.
I thought that was a strategic error by the Liberal Democrats, and they'll have to rethink that. We mustn't forget as well, Camilla, that the polls are actually showing around Labour they may be drifting down slightly. Now, their lead is staying the same because the Conservatives are also in a terrible position, but actually the YouGov poll published yesterday had Labour down at 38, and I think it is that 40%. I don't know if people will even remember this, but a part of the coalition agreement was that there would be a referendum on proportional representation as part of the coalition agreement. And there was in the UK in 2011. Nearly 70% of voters voted to keep first past the post. It was always seen in those days, and of course as part of the coalition it was in those days, a sort of Liberal Democrat obsession, a sort of liberal obsession, slightly, I think,
Fringy,
you might say
fringy,
wet.
Yes.
Fringe,
I
wet.
might say wet,
The
a
kind of
little
thing
bit.
I support, although actually I'm not actually a supporter of PR, but anyway, that's for another discussion. But in this election, Reform actually have said that first past the post is an outdated voting system. They're saying that lots of people don't have any representation, and they are saying that they want a change in the political system. So if we have a supermajority on Labour on less than 40%, I think this could become a big new debate that hasn't been discussed in the election. Keir Starmer has always been pretty negative on proportional representation. I think he may be in the wrong place. And I think the Liberal Democrats, if Reform UK win seats, if they believe as a principle that the number of votes should have a direct relationship with how many seats you have in Parliament, they can't stop that principle at a certain point on the political spectrum.
It's really important then for Reform supporters that Nigel Farage stays in that party and not the Conservatives, because if he's absorbed into a new right in the Conservatives, he isn't going to be plumping for PR, is he? He'll be back to supporting first past the post. This reader comment by Peter Miller sort of sums up the mood, I think, among the Telegraph community. It's not fair that parties which gain a substantial national vote but don't win any seats are locked out of the system. The UK needs proportional representation so a broader spectrum of opinion can be heard in Parliament. It's not perfect, what is, but politics has become stale, repetitive and totally unappealing for millions of voters.
The problem with proportional representation, it's not something you march for, is it? You can't
It's
imagine.
not sexy like
you
Brexit,
can't imagine
is it? No.
proportional. What do we want? Proportional representation. When do we want it? Nowish.
In
It just doesn't
collaboration with
quite-
lots of other
Yes.
parties.
It's one of those very awkward ones, but it's a really serious debate. Another one of our readers' comments that came on our website earlier today from Jason Chamberlain. He says, the simple truth is most politicians don't tell the truth. Love him or loathe him, Nigel Farage does at least say what he's thinking, and we all have a pretty clear idea on what he wants. Politicians from the other parties won't tell us things that they think we don't want to hear. They need to get out from behind their focus groups and tell us the truth. The Social Attitude Survey has shown that the public is actually, I always think, quite willing to give governments quite a lot of space to kind of run things. They don't think everything should be perfect. But if you look at what has happened since 2010, we go back to these points again. The pandemic, the energy shock, the Liz Truss short premiership has really broken the relationship between the voters and those that rule over them. Economically, just to throw this in, and I've been talking about this for a long, long time, 2007 and 2008 and the financial crisis was that moment when trust really started falling because voters were suddenly told you might not get access to your money. That was such two major roles of government. Keep the country secure and make sure I can access my money. Those are the two requisites of a government. 2007 and 2008, when suddenly it appeared that the banking system could crash and stop. And there was a moment over that amazing weekend when the Royal Bank of Scotland more or less went bust, that the cash points may not open. I think that was the moment that set off a chain of events that we have seen slowly develop ever since to today's British Social Attitude Survey.
Although, by the way, Gordon Brown, to his credit, did weaponise this more than Sunak has with COVID, OK? We kept on hearing on repeat everything blamed on the global economic crash, the global financial crash. Why hasn't Sunak been reminding the electorate every day that we've just gone through a global pandemic? We were almost on a war footing. People weren't working for months. Instead, Sunak sought to sort of sanitise it all by going on about furlough. He should have been saying that one of the main reasons why we are in this mess is not the government's fault, it's the fault of COVID-19. And he hasn't done that because he's bad at politics.
I think that is exactly it. Just hearing you say it in comparison with how he tried to say about furlough, he's obviously been given this advice about not seeming to be tetchy. And his not seeming to be tetchy has turned into not seeming to be passionate. And I think that when you were there with him yesterday for the Manifesto launch at Silverstone, he came across it quite flat. And I think he's confused statesmanship and calmness with the public looking at him saying, I'm not sure you even care about where we are
But you
as a
can
country.
be calm and be a fighter. It's not like we see, like Farage is just much better at communicating the simple stuff. Boris was as well. Boris Johnson was. Tony Blair certainly was. In a way, I know she was mocked for it, but the spirit of Penny Mordaunt's speech at the Tory party conference, stand up and fight, is the sort of emotion that Sunak should be channeling. And instead what we got yesterday was sort of a Silverstone appearance at the end of the road. He looked tired and beaten up. And that's not what you want, really, particularly from a young politician. Funnily enough, Kamal, at the beginning of his political career, theoretically, he only got elected in 2015. But there's still 3 more weeks to go.
There are. And we'll be coming back to Rishi Sunak at the end of the Daily Tea about just how wealthy can you be as the leader of a political party. But next, after the break, we'll be getting into climate change, the dog that really hasn't barked.
Welcome back. Well, today the Greens have launched their manifesto, and they've done it in Hove, which obviously they would do it there because there's lots of people who are green-minded in that neck of the woods on the south coast.
And I think it's their one. Is it their one
it's
MP?
Their one MP
and
is
I
in
think
that
they're
area.
possibly looking like they may win that again. I think there are a couple of other seats around the country where they may have a chance in the election.
Well, they did very well in the locals, so let's see whether that's translated. But the Greens co-leader, so along with Carla Denyer, is Adrian Ramsey, and he's complained about the other main parties. He's saying that they have delivered too little in terms of climate policies.
Now, if you look at the other parties, the climate crisis has been pretty much absent from this election campaign so far. The other parties are running away from their promises on climate. Only the Greens understand that the solutions to the climate crisis are also the solutions to the cost of living crisis. The climate crisis is the most serious we face as a global community. Our commitment to you is that protecting our climate and nature lies at the heart of all of our policies. We won't give you fake numbers or spin the data, but we will strive every single day to take the action that's needed.
Kamal, Adrian Ramsey, the co-leader of the Greens there, isn't wrong, is he? I mean, I was struck yesterday as I thumbed through the manifesto very quickly to get everything ready for the podcast.
For the Conservatives,
Yeah, for the Conservatives, that actually they're using a lot of different language around net zero, and it's moving away from talk of catastrophe and calling for pragmatism in the approach to green policies. And the Conservatives have said if they're re-elected, they're going to freeze all green levies. So this was a massive sort of green reverse ferret. And we haven't heard that much from Labour either, have we?
We haven't. Where is Ed Miliband, some might say?
He?
Ed Miliband is the climate change and net zero shadow minister. If you think about which shadow cabinet members alongside Keir Starmer have really been at the heart of Labour's campaign, it's been Rachel Reeves, the shadow chancellor, Wes Streeting, the shadow health secretary, and Angela Rayner, the deputy leader of the Labour Party. It's been those three plus Keir Starmer who have been spearheading the campaign. That shows the priority that Labour, frankly, isn't putting on climate change. Ed Miliband has been very rarely seen in the what you might describe as the mainstream campaign, although we know that climate change is a much more motivating factor for younger voters. He has been popping up quite regularly on TikTok.
I've got 30 seconds to tell you about Great British Energy.
Oh my God, is that Ed Miliband? Where are you going?
I'm off to set up GB Energy. See you later. Bye. I'm literally standing on top of a nuclear reactor.
Kamal, is he all right? Is he
Your
high? Is he
eyebrows
high?
there. Camilla, your eyebrows of shock were going up and down there quite rapidly.
Is he high on bacon sandwiches? God love Ed. You said, where is he? Maybe he's looking for the Ed Stone. Who knows? But maybe it's because Labour already think they've got the younger vote in the bag, so they're not having to go full Greta Thunberg because they feel that people who are environmentally conscious are going to go with them. And because of that conversation we've just had about PR, they're not too worried about the Greens.
This drifts, Camilla, though, into this idea that Labour aren't getting a mandate. If they do want to do big things on climate, but they're not really going to talk about it in the run-up to the election, do they have a mandate? Because their mandate isn't you're not the Conservatives. That's not a mandate for government. That's
They're hoping
that's
that
a
is
reason.
the mandate.
Well, that's a reason for voting for somebody. But I think Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and Wes Streeting and all of them need to think carefully How are we ensuring we have a mandate for change? So this manifesto tomorrow, Camilla, is such a significant moment, given that we're, 22 days away from the next election. In 23 days, we'll have a new government, likely to be, at least in party terms, very different from the government we have at present. We need to know, in policy terms, what's it going to look like?
I mean, we've got no clue at all at this stage. We've had some hints about raising capital gains tax. There'll probably be a wealth tax in there. What they will do on green issues. The trouble is they've shot themselves in the foot on this because they came out with their £28 billion green prosperity plan. Then it was watered down by Rachel Reeves, who looked at the accounts and said, hang on, we probably don't have enough money for this. This is the main problem as well, by the way, with Labour's whole positioning. Supermajority, small majority, whatever majority they have, they're a government that wants to spend because they've said they don't want austerity, but they're a government that at the same time says they don't want to borrow too much. I think Rachel Reeves has said we've got to borrow within certain parameters because they're trying to retain that reputation they've got for fiscal discipline.
Same rules as the Conservatives have put in place.
Exactly. So they need to seem fiscally responsible. So the big question is, how are you going to be raising the money for all of these pledges when you yourself has said, a little bit like the note that Liam Byrne left as Chief Secretary to the Treasury back in the day, there's no money left. And if there's no money left and they can't spend anything, how is that left-wing phalanx of the party that expects money trees to be planted and everybody to benefit, how are they going to keep them happy if they can't do the things they want them to do?
And on climate, even on TikTok, for their younger voters or for voters who are consuming much more of their political messaging on TikTok rather than through television, etc., their big, motivating policy is they are setting up GB Energy. Honestly, Camilla, if we went outside this studio, out into the streets in London and said, what are your thoughts on GB Energy? 99% of the people that you asked would not know what you are talking about. There's a bigger point as well. We were talking about the European Parliament elections the other day, and the Greens really struggled. I think when we look back on about 10 years of campaigning, I think Greta Thunberg was a real cut-through moment, but about 10 years of campaigning on climate change has failed politically for those who believe there should be stronger political action on climate change. And that is because it has always coalesced around this single word, catastrophe. And if you start with the word catastrophe, lots of people go away from you.
Yes.
And I remember seeing data, this was a few years ago, that climate audiences are basically in three big groups. Firstly, there is the Greta Thunberg, Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth. We need to act. The world is burning down. Change everything, even if that means less growth. That's what we need to do. That's the kind of third. The second third are those, which is where Adrian Ramsey was sort of poking, but they've completely failed to make this argument. Will this save me money? Will this mean inequality will change? Will this be different because my car might be cheaper or my heating bills will be cheaper? Make it an economic argument. And then there's a third of people who, and this touches on the British Social Attitude Survey, are just not interested and don't believe governments can solve anything. It all feeds into that same big theme. Well, if you can't solve anything, why should I listen to you shouting about it? And the Green campaigners have all focused on that first third, the Greta Thunberg third.
Yes, I mean, Thunberg now, you have ruined my childhood, just seems absolutely
Where's
preposterous.
she from again, Camilla?
I'm not quite sure, but that's my best impression, if you don't mind. And I think that as well, in your groups of people, where do we fit in these people? Because I think this is the silent majority of Brits anyway. And it's this attitude. Do you know what? The UK has done well. We have reduced our carbon emissions. I personally am very good at recycling, thank you very much. I'm putting things in all sorts of different bins. I'm trying to replace my car. I'm trying to use it less and go on my bike and do all of the things I'm advised to do. And still I'm faced with Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion, ruining Wimbledon. I'm made to feel guilty everywhere I turn. And look at what's happening in India and China. That is a huge proportion of the population.
And that's what David Cameron needed to try to get into and motivate, what you might describe as that sort of National Trust green, beautiful Britain green, with his idea of vote blue, go green, but go green in that gentle way that you've just described, I think that would be so much more advantageous to the Green lobby. Just to, I know you love a bit of behavioural economics, Camilla.
If I knew what that was, I could possibly
There are two
comment.
other things at play here. One is loss aversion. This idea that, and this is where the ULEZ thing came, and the notion of having to be charged more to drive your car. If you tell the public you are taking things away from them, they hear that twice as strongly as when you say you are giving them something. There is lots of psychological evidence that losing a fiver is twice as bad as finding a fiver. That's called loss aversion. So
Yes,
the
I can
way the
follow
Greens,
that,
the way the Greens are playing this, and this is why ULEZ became so negative. You're going to charge me more. The public really dislike the idea of losing something, and what's called status quo bias. We like some change, but we're most comfortable. And this is again, it's a very British thing. Just like you said, this notion of the silent majority. It's quite a British thing. I quite like things like they are because I quite like this country. I think you wrote in your column this notion of being proud to be British.
Yes.
And this idea that I like the status quo. Literal conservatism with a small c is about things should probably remain pretty similar to how they are already because that's the kind of country we are.
Isn't it also the reasonableness test that I remember from doing my law degree? You know, is this reasonable? What would the man on the Clapham omnibus think was what we used to have to ask ourselves when it came to analysing legal cases. And actually, Thunbergian and Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion behaviour seems completely unreasonable. In fact, it seems unreasonable to ask people to not drive diesels and petrol cars from 2030. What they could have done, which would have been more accommodating, would be to apply an 80-20 principle. Say to people, do you know what? That's too much of a leap. But what we want you to do is drive hybrids. So we want you 80% of the time for all of your local journeys to be plugging in and using an electric vehicle. But we do understand that sometimes you have to drive to Skegness, and therefore we understand that petrol will still need to be used. That would strike people as reasonable as opposed to the unreasonable setting of arbitrary targets.
And isn't it so similar, just like in that way, this idea we should have the conversation. It's like immigration.
Yes.
This subject was suddenly landed on people, and here's a whole load more cost, and here's a whole load more things you need to do, which the public didn't really understand. It would just and I think there are some really similar themes in the immigration debate. If we had a conversation and discussed, do we need immigration? Don't we need immigration? How is it controlled? What should the number be? What are the cultural aspects that we need to think about? What are the economic aspects we need to think about? People are very reasonable.
Yes.
As you say, this notion of what's reasonable seems to be really lacking amongst so much of political discussion that we need to have. And what you get in the ding-dong of an election campaign is almost the least amount of discussion. You just get people shouting, and no wonder voters look at that and they are completely unconvinced.
Absolutely. Be interesting to look at turnout. I was looking at this earlier with regard to our other discussion. This was surprising. Turnout in 2019 was 67.3% across the UK. That was down 1.5 percentage points from 2017. So you could say that there's a trend which reflects low turnout. I hadn't realised that 2019 was the second highest turnout since 1997. So this idea that we're not turning out anymore when we talk about apathy, people thinking that politicians are unreasonable and all the rest of it, actually, turnout hasn't tanked.
Yeah, and that shows how much has changed since 2019. People were very motivated, don't forget, with get Brexit done. We'd passed the referendum. We had left the European Union, but nothing had happened. This was obviously literally 3 years later. So there was a very motivating factor. I think the problem here is, and this is why when we come to election night itself, turnout will be really interesting. And certainly Labour, I don't know if you're picking this up from the Conservatives, but Labour are worried that two things. Firstly, lack of trust. People don't care about politics or think that politics can't solve anything. And second thing, Labour are going to win anyway,
Yes.
will mean that turnout will be depressed.
I think the Conservatives were worried about people not turning out, and now they're more worried about people turning out for reform.
Now, Camilla, just how rich can you be and be a party leader?
Well, in Rishi Sunak's case, very, I think is the answer to that. I mean, I've got a different view to you on this, but shall we hear how he has coped with this increased scrutiny of his own bank balance? This is awkward, isn't it? This interview that he's done with Paul Brand of ITV, which was the interview that he left Normandy early for to come back to London.
It's going to haunt him, isn't it? That is going to haunt him for the rest of his career, wherever it ends up, Silicon Valley, whatever, that's going to haunt him.
Do you know what? We could do a whole podcast on Rishi Sunak's legacy, except it would only last about 5 minutes, but that's a story for another day. So this is a double whammy with Paul Brand because, first of all, he enters the room mic'd up and says, sorry, I'm late, but the D-Day commemorations ran over.
Always remember your hot mic, Camilla. Isn't that basic broadcasting?
We told him that when he walked in the door here. We said, by the way, Prime Minister, you're being recorded from the moment you step in the studio. Let's just listen to that, first of all.
Prime Minister.
Gosh, hello.
Good to see you.
Very nice to see you. Hey, sorry to
I'm
have
well,
kept
thanks
you.
No, not at all. I know you've been in Normandy.
Yeah, it all just ran over. It was incredible, but it just ran over everything.
I'm sure it was
so apologies for keeping you.
No, not at all. I'm sure it was a powerful trip. I mean, so pertinent as well this year, considering what's happened in Ukraine.
Yeah, which I haven't seen President Biden's remarks, but I think that's kind of the echo, I think, what he said.
Did you get to meet any of the veterans, or were you...
Oh, no,
did you just have to do the ceremonial?
Lots, over yesterday and today.
Literally hadn't heard President Biden's response. It's like hearing something, isn't it, when they haven't seen the car crash.
No.
So they're still talking. That idea that when life changes and you haven't noticed and you're still talking in the era before the D-Day debacle.
Yes.
He was still a happy guy, feeling confident, had done D-Day well, polls might be changing, but already the bomb was ticking and it was about to go off.
And the following morning, it exploded in his face. So that was quite bad. But then this was even more #orcs. This question about what he'd had to sacrifice as a youngster.
When you are wealthier than the king, what do you do day to day to make sure you're still in touch with the kind of struggles ordinary people face? Have you ever gone without something?
Yeah, I mean, my family emigrated here with very little, and that's how I was raised. I was raised with the values of hard work.
What did you go without as a child?
We went out with lots of things, right? Because my parents wanted to put everything into our education, and that was a priority.
So what sort of things had to be sacrificed?
Lots of things, right?
Can you give me an example of
all sorts
something?
of things. So, like lots of people, there'll be all sorts of things that I would have wanted as a kid that I couldn't have, right? Famously, Sky TV.
Okay.
So that was something that we never had growing up, actually.
That was Rishi Sunak speaking to ITV's Paul Brand. Now, I'm familiar with this sort of bristling about his background because I remember distinctly, and I think sort of overshadowed our subsequent relationship, really, me asking him about his Winchester school education and seemingly his vast wealth and whether that prevented him from connecting with the ordinary member of the public when I interviewed him for the Telegraph leadership hustings, which was when it was a head-to-head between Sunak and Truss circa 2022. Obviously, lots have been made about your wife's family wealth and things. You do appreciate, of course, as a Winchester schoolboy, that you were afforded opportunities that have not been offered to many children in the UK. What will you do about that?
Yes, I have. I am absolutely, as you saw from me on the stage, I'm not going to apologise for what my parents did for me. You must be joking.
You can hear there lots of fanboys and girls in the audience booing that question. And on that occasion, he just owned it. Why on earth didn't he own it in this interview, Kamal?
We've seen so many times over this campaign, I don't think Rishi Sunak is getting very good political advice.
Not getting any good advice, full stop.
How you would answer that question that Paul Brand... He had to actually, if you look at a longer part of the clip, Paul Brand has to put it to him quite a few times before he gets to the I didn't have Sky TV, which he says famously didn't have Sky TV.
Yes.
I'm not sure that every member of the public knows that. Oh, golly, do you hear? Rishi Sunak didn't have Sky TV. Anyway, so if you're getting good political advice, you should be wargaming. How do I answer questions like X and like Y? My advice would be to him say, I was very fortunate with my upbringing. I didn't suffer the privations that so many people have suffered, but I go and speak to people about those things. And the reasons I'm in politics is to solve the problems for the people who weren't as fortunate as I am. throw in a little bit of the immigrant parents not having very much, but don't pretend that you suffered any privation. You need to go in with, that's why I'm a politician. That's my values.
Yeah.
It's not about whether I'm wealthy or not wealthy, but it's about what can I do about it. And I'm showing that I am doing something about it, even though my family and, frankly, it's his wife, isn't it, who's actually the real wealthy person in their relationship, even though we are very privileged. Now, that is so better to answer. And you're not getting trapped in the soundbite viral moment. Do you remember that huge TikTok? I haven't looked back at how many millions of people have now seen it. When he was at Winchester and he gave an interview when he was a student.
Yes.
And he went through, he had friends from many different backgrounds. And then he said, not the working class.
No, obviously not.
And
yes.
that became a huge issue. Now, it's not about whether sort of Rishi Sunak was right when he was a college boy or Rishi Sunak is right now. When you're a politician and you are the leader of a party and you are the prime minister, it is about the advice you get politically and then what you deploy in different situations. And that's where he missteps time and time again.
So you can have politicians weaponising, I was brought up in a cardboard box in the middle of the street and therefore I can better connect with people. But oh no, you can't be privately educated, you can't go to Eton. There was this whole dialogue about Boris Johnson. It's slightly naive, actually, just coming from a position of privilege myself, posh girl called Camilla, privately educated. My father was a GP and my stepmother was a pharmacist. My actual mother was an alcoholic. So, yes, I had a wonderfully privileged upbringing and went to the best school and all the rest of it. I had a pretty miserable childhood. I probably would have replaced my mother's Gucci handbags with a mother that was functioning in the evenings, to be fair. Equally, and this is, I suppose, the distinction, and it's good politics versus bad politics, of, say, Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson just owned who he was, flaws, warts and all.
Authenticity, yeah.
Authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And also, by the way, yes, he had all of the privileges, but everybody knew he had a highly dysfunctional upbringing, that he moved home countless times. We've subsequently found out that his parents' relationship wasn't always that rock solid. And I think we look at Boris Johnson as a man and maybe as a husband and father, and we make judgments perhaps about how he was brought up. But the point is, this is also playing into Angela Rayner's sort of Tory scum, Eton scum narrative that's totally unhelpful. Are we saying that we can only now have people who have gone to comprehensive schools running the country? Is that what we're saying?
I hope not. I dislike intensely anyone who makes this into an ideological point, which, Rishi Sunak can't help his background. You can't help how you were brought up. It is interesting how some people this becomes a problem for and some people doesn't. I think you've answered Boris Johnson absolutely precisely why it's not an issue for him, and that's about authenticity. Nigel Farage is a rich person who actually plays the idea that he's a man of the people, even though, of course, he went to a very famous private school in London. He has been a banker and a trader most of his career. He's not like the people who vote for him. But
he wouldn't buy a coffee cup for a couple of £100.
No, he wouldn't. It hasn't become a problem for him. David Cameron, there was a little bit of a problem with David Cameron. Sir Keir Starmer has had a bit of an issue. Tony Blair had a little bit of an issue about being posh boy from the North London liberal poshies. That kind of has stuck a bit to
Cherry Blair got a load of flack. Do you remember when she sold stuff on eBay?
Yes.
People were like, what are you playing at? You're a rich lawyer.
People were very cross that Tony Blair managed to buy quite an expensive house once he'd stopped being Prime Minister, which I always found rather odd. I think, again, the reasonableness test, I don't think, it's all about who you are and what you do, rather than your background and whether you happen to be wealthy or not. Because frankly, Camilla, you and me, nearly all of our colleagues in journalism are very, very different from the people that we write for, and from many, we all are above the median average for our income. Lisa Nandy, it was at the 7-way debate that we both went to. We did the leaders debate. We did the live podcast from there. Lisa Nandy, I thought, made a very interesting point that, again, for Labour isn't made enough of. We, the Labour Party, maybe not Sir Keir Starmer, but people like Lisa, are like the people who vote for us. That was quite interesting. And although I agree wholeheartedly with you, there shouldn't be a kind of, what is it going to be, an income bracket that you're only allowed to be within if you want to be a leader of a party? Of course not. That would be ridiculous. But when Lisa and Andy said that, I thought, yeah, that's quite an interesting line.
Kamal, you're going to go to Manchester tomorrow. You're going
I am looking forward on the early train.
The early train. So you'll be there. You'll be poring over the manifesto, trying to get interviews with the Labour big beasts, and I'll be back in the studio. So we'll do a reverse on what we did for the Tory manifesto. Very much looking forward to it. So stay tuned for that tomorrow. We'll be dropping the podcast at 5 p.m. as usual.
We will. Really big day for Labour tomorrow. Probably the next government. This is the moment they put their manifesto, their menu of policies in front of the public. So it's a real moment to sit up and take notice.